Imagine walking across the vast plains of South America during the Ice Age. The air is cool, the land dotted with strange plants, and in the distance, something stirs. A massive creature, larger than an elephant, covered in thick, shaggy fur. It rises on its hind legs, towering over you like a living wall of muscle and bone. This is no myth, no legend. It was real. A giant ground sloth, one of the most extraordinary beasts ever to walk alongside prehistoric humans. Today, when we think of sloths, we picture small, sleepy animals hanging lazily from jungle trees. But their ancient cousins were very different. These giants, known as Megatherium and Mylodon, could weigh up to 4 tons and stretch over 6 meters in length. They were slow, yes, but not harmless. With claws as long as a man's arm and immense strength, they were forces of nature in their own right. And here lies the mystery. Our ancestors, prehistoric humans, lived at the same time as these creatures. Some evidence even suggests they may have hunted them, used their remains, and perhaps even recorded their memory in myths and cave art. What was it like for early humans to share their world with such colossal beings? Were these creatures simply prey, or were they something more? Symbols, adversaries, or even sacred animals in the human imagination? In this journey, we will uncover the secrets of the giant sloths, their origins, their role in the great story of evolution, their encounters with early humans, and the mystery of their sudden disappearance. By the end, we must ask ourselves, how much of our past remains hidden beneath layers of forgotten earth, waiting to remind us that our ancestors lived in a world stranger and more dangerous than we dare to imagine.
The story of the giant sloths begins long before the first humans ever set foot in the Americas. To truly understand them, we must rewind the clock millions of years, to a time when South America was an isolated continent, a lost world of evolution where nature experimented in ways unseen anywhere else. For tens of millions of years, South America developed its own unique caste of animals. Terror birds taller than a man, armored glyptodons resembling walking tanks, and giant ground sloths that would one day capture our imagination. This evolutionary isolation created creatures that seemed more like products of myth than of biology. The largest of these sloths was Megatherium americanum. First described in the late 18th century by the French naturalist Georges Cuvier, its fossils shocked the scientific world. The bones revealed a massive animal, unlike anything alive. Some even speculated at the time that these creatures might still exist in unexplored jungles. That sense of wonder, the idea of a beast too large, too strange to have truly vanished, never really disappeared. But what were they really like? Standing nearly 6 meters tall when rearing up, Megatherium was a browser, feeding on tough plants, branches, and leaves. Its huge claws weren't just weapons, they were tools, used to pull down branches or dig up roots. Other species like Mylodon of Patagonia were smaller, but still formidable, with evidence suggesting thick skin, almost armor-like in places. For early humans entering South America, these animals were part of the landscape they had to navigate. Imagine arriving in a new land, no maps, no knowledge of what lurked in the forests, and finding yourself face to face with a beast that could topple trees. For the first migrants crossing from Asia into the Americas, giant ground sloths were among the last of Earth's great megafauna awaiting discovery. The archaeological evidence is tantalizing. In caves across South America, particularly in Patagonia, scientists have uncovered preserved sloth skin, dung, and bones. Some even bear cut marks, suggesting human tools were used on their carcasses. One of the most famous discoveries is the Cueva del Mylodon in southern Chile, where explorers in the late 19th century found remains so fresh-looking that rumors spread of living sloths still roaming the region. Stories of explorers chasing mysterious beasts through the forests became part of the folklore. But the most important question remains. What role did these creatures play in human survival and in their extinction? Were they hunted to death by tribes desperate for food? Did climate change wipe them out? Or could it have been a combination of both, a tragic intersection between human ingenuity and environmental upheaval? The Ice Age was a time of giants, and humans lived among them all. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and yes, giant ground sloths. Each encounter shaped our evolution, teaching us new ways to hunt, adapt, and survive. In this sense, archaeology and paleontology do more than tell us about extinct animals. They reveal the crucible in which humanity itself was forged. The discovery of these sloths forces us to rethink human prehistory. We often imagine our ancestors living in a world much like our own, just harsher and more primitive. But in truth, their world was alien. It was filled with creatures that today seem impossible, animals that blurred the line between predator, prey, and myth. And at the heart of this strange menagerie stood the giant ground sloth, slow-moving but unstoppable, peaceful in appearance yet capable of tremendous power. Even today, debates rage among scientists. Some argue that humans could never have brought down such massive beasts, that their size and strength would have made them nearly unkillable. Others point to the telltale marks of stone tools on bones as undeniable evidence of hunting. The truth may lie somewhere in between. But one thing is certain. The story of giant sloths is not just about them. It is about us. It is about the humans who encountered them, who tested their courage against them, who perhaps sang songs or told stories of their encounters around firelit nights. And as we peel back the layers of time, we realize to understand our own survival, our own rise, we must understand the giants who once shared the earth with us. The bones buried in caves, the claw marks on ancient rock, and the legends whispered among indigenous peoples, all of these are fragments of a puzzle that reminds us of a lost chapter of human history, when our species walked beside creatures so vast they seemed almost supernatural. And so we arrive at the great mystery. Why did they vanish? Did humans play the executioner's role? Did shifting climates seal their fate? Or are we missing something even greater? An untold story of coexistence, conflict, and collapse. In the next part of our journey, we will step closer into this mystery. We will imagine the world as it was, the hunters stalking the grasslands, the shadows of enormous beasts moving in the distance, and the fragile thread of survival that bound humans and megafauna together.
Picture this. A small band of prehistoric humans moving cautiously across the open plains of Ice Age South America. They are armed not with iron or bronze, but with sharpened stone spear points and fire-hardened wooden shafts. The wind carries the scent of dust and animals, and in the distance, enormous shapes loom, giant sloths, slowly shifting their weight as they forage among the trees. For these early humans, the giant sloth was both opportunity and danger. Its massive body promised meat, fat, and hide, resources that could mean the difference between life and death in a harsh climate. But the same size that made the sloth desirable also made it nearly invincible. Standing taller than a man when on all fours and towering like a two-story house when rearing up, the giant ground sloth was not an animal to be trifled with. Archaeological finds give us glimpses of these encounters. At sites in Argentina, bones of giant sloths show cut marks consistent with human butchery. It is possible that some of these animals were scavenged, humans finding the carcass of a sloth that had already died of natural causes. But other evidence suggests active hunting.
Imagine the strategy required. Hunters working together, driving the animal into a trap or surrounding it near water. One mistake, one misplaced step, and a single swing of those claws, each as long as a human forearm, could end a life instantly. The claws themselves are worth pausing on. Curved and thick, they weren't designed for killing prey like a saber-tooth's fangs, but they were devastating tools. Used for pulling down branches, digging up roots, or defending against predators, they could slash through muscle and bone. In the eyes of our ancestors, these claws must have been terrifying. They may have even become symbols, carried as talismans, painted in ochre on cave walls, reminders of the struggle between human fragility and nature's might. But humans had something that giant sloths did not: strategy, communication, and relentless persistence. Where a single hunter could not succeed, a tribe working in unison could. By coordinating ambushes, using fire to direct the movement of the herd, or driving sloths into natural traps like swamps and ravines, humans may have managed to accomplish what seemed impossible: bringing down the giants. But it wasn't always about killing. Consider the possibility that humans and giant sloths coexisted in ways more complex than predator and prey. In some regions, humans might have avoided them entirely, treating them with respect or even reverence. Indigenous myths collected centuries later sometimes describe enormous, slow-moving creatures of the forests, stories that may echo ancient memories passed down through generations. The environment itself added another layer of complexity. During the last ice age, South America was not a frozen wasteland like the far north, but it was cooler and drier than today. Grassland stretched across the pampas and forests dominated Patagonia. These ecosystems supported not only giant sloths, but also saber-toothed cats, glyptodons, and giant armadillos. For humans, this was a world of giants, each encounter shaping their survival strategies. Let us imagine one such scene. A sloth emerges from the tree line, lumbering forward with deliberate slowness. Its fur is thick, matted with dust. The hunters crouch low, their breath steady, hearts pounding. The leader signals. Spears fly. One strikes true, embedding into the animal's flank. With a guttural roar, the sloth rears up, swiping the air with claws that could tear a man apart. The hunters scatter, regrouping, circling like wolves. Hours pass. The sloth weakens, not from speed, but from persistence. Finally, the giant collapses. Victory comes not from strength, but from endurance and cooperation, the very qualities that defined human evolution. Scenes like this repeated over generations could have altered the balance between humans and megafauna. The sloths were not breeding quickly enough to replace those lost. And as climate shifted at the end of the Ice Age, glaciers retreating, ecosystems changing, the pressure on these creatures intensified. The great irony is that the very qualities that allowed humans to thrive, ingenuity, persistence, the ability to hunt together, may have sealed the fate of the giant ground sloths. But the story doesn't end with bones in the ground. In Patagonia's Cueva del Mylodon, explorers discovered not only sloth remains, but also large pieces of preserved hide, still bearing thick, coarse hair. For those who first saw them, it was as if the creature had only recently died. Rumors spread of living sloths still hiding in the forests. Even today, local folklore sometimes whispers of strange, lumbering beasts glimpsed in the night. Are these merely echoes of memory? Or could they be something more? The survival of such legends reminds us that the line between prehistory and myth is not always clear. When humans lived beside creatures so immense, so powerful, it is natural that their presence lingered long after they were gone. The hunters who faced them did not simply eat them. They told stories, painted symbols, and carried the memory forward. In this way, the giant sloth became more than just an animal. It became part of the human story, part of the crucible in which humanity tested itself, learned cooperation, and proved that intelligence could overcome even the mightiest of beasts.
The extinction of the giant sloths is one of the great unsolved mysteries of prehistory, and at its heart lies a question that has haunted archaeology and paleontology for decades. What truly caused their disappearance? Two primary theories dominate the debate. The first is climate change. Around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, the Ice Age drew to a close. Vast glaciers melted, oceans rose, and ecosystems shifted. Regions that were once cool and grassy became warmer, drier, or swampier. For creatures adapted to a very specific environment, these changes were catastrophic. Food sources dwindled, habitats shrank, and competition grew fiercer. The second theory is human hunting. Archaeological evidence of butchery, marks carved into giant sloth bones with sharp stone tools, suggests that prehistoric humans did indeed consume these giants. When small bands of humans entered new territories, their impact may have been greater than we imagine. These animals were slow breeding. Even minimal hunting pressure, compounded over generations, could have pushed populations to the brink. The truth may be more complex. Many scientists now suspect it was not one factor, but both, climate change and human activity, that delivered the final blow. This is known as the overkill hypothesis, where human hunting acted as the spark that ignited the collapse already set in motion by a warming world. But the debate is far from settled. In fact, some discoveries have complicated the story even further. Take the famous Cueva del Mylodon in Chile. In the 1890s, explorers found not just bones, but skin and hair, so well preserved that some believed giant sloths might still survive in the remote Patagonian wilderness. Rumors spread of living beasts in the forests, described by locals as monsters or demons of the night. For decades, these tales tantalized explorers, blurring the line between scientific fact and folklore. Could it be that the last giant sloths survived longer than science believes, perhaps even overlapping with human myths and legends? Other finds suggest this possibility. A study of dung samples from caves in the American Southwest indicates that giant sloths may have survived much later than once thought, perhaps even into the time when human civilizations were forming their first villages. If true, then early farmers, not just hunter-gatherers, may have coexisted with these beasts. This brings us to another fascinating question. How did prehistoric humans perceive the giant sloths? Were they simply prey, or did they hold symbolic meaning? Indigenous traditions across the Americas speak of giant, shaggy creatures of the forest, slow but dangerous. Some Amazonian tribes have stories of monstrous ground dwellers with claws that could tear a man apart. While these myths cannot be taken as direct historical accounts, they may preserve fragments of cultural memory, echoes of real encounters passed down through generations until the animals themselves were gone, leaving only stories behind. Consider how our ancestors may have viewed them. To humans struggling for survival, the giant sloth was an embodiment of paradox. Slow yet mighty, peaceful yet terrifying, harmless in its diet but equipped with claws that could kill. Such duality often places animals into the realm of myth. Just as lions became symbols of courage and serpents of danger and wisdom, perhaps the giant sloth, too, became a symbol of patience, endurance, or unstoppable force. Archaeologists remain cautious, but the idea is tantalizing, that some of the myths we hear today may be the last living trace of an animal that walked the earth thousands of years ago. Of course, scientific debates continue. Some researchers argue that humans were incapable of bringing down so many large animals given their small population sizes. They point to climate models showing drastic environmental changes that would have stressed giant sloth populations even without human interference. Others counter with the undeniable evidence of human tool marks, insisting that even minimal hunting pressure would have tipped the balance. The deeper we dig, the more the story reveals itself as not just about the giant sloths, but about the relationship between humans and nature. Were we merely passive observers of extinction, or were we the executioners of the last great giants? This question matters because it touches on something far greater than the fate of one species. The extinction of the giant sloths was part of a broader pattern.
In just a few thousand years, much of Earth's Ice Age megafauna vanished. Mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and giant armadillos, to name a few. The timing is suspiciously close to the arrival of humans in new lands. Could it be that everywhere we went, giants fell in our wake? And if so, what does this say about us? Not just as survivors, but as shapers, even destroyers of the natural world. Perhaps the giant sloths teach us that humanity's relationship with nature has always been complicated. From the beginning, we were not just participants in the ecosystem, we were forces that altered it. We were clever, adaptable, and determined. But with every triumph came a cost. Imagine standing before the remains of a giant sloth today, in a museum or in a cave deep in Patagonia. The bones are silent, but they carry questions. Did your ancestors kill me, or did I fall to the changing earth? Did you fear me? Did you revere me? Did you tell stories about me to your children under starlit skies? These are the unanswered questions that archaeology cannot fully resolve, but they remind us that history is not only written in facts and fossils, but in mysteries that demand imagination. In the end, perhaps the extinction of the giant sloths was not a single tragedy, but a reflection of humanity's earliest crossroads, a time when we were learning what it meant to be not just part of nature, but powerful enough to change it forever. And in that realization lies the bridge to our next exploration. What lessons can these vanished giants teach us about our present and our future?
When we speak of giant sloths, it may be tempting to think of them only as curiosities of the past, monsters from an ancient world that no longer concerns us. Yet their story is far more than a footnote in prehistory. It is a mirror, one that reflects the deepest truths about humanity, our resilience, our ingenuity, and our power, for better or worse, to shape the world around us. Let us pause and imagine what our ancestors must have felt when they first encountered a creature like Megatherium. Awe, certainly, fear, likely, but also determination. The Ice Age was not a time of abundance. Food was scarce, climates were harsh, and survival was never guaranteed. Every encounter with a giant sloth represented both danger and possibility. To take down such a beast required unity, patience, and courage. Success meant not only meat for the tribe, but bones for tools, hide for shelter, sinew for binding. In this sense, the giant sloths became silent teachers. They forced humans to sharpen their strategies, to rely on one another, and to innovate in ways that smaller prey never demanded. Cooperation was not optional. It was the difference between life and death. Isn't that still true for us today? Humanity only thrives when it works together, when individuals unite for the survival and progress of the group. But there is another lesson, perhaps darker. If humans played a role in the extinction of these creatures, even indirectly, then the giant sloths also remind us of the cost of our power. With every advance, every fire lit, every spear thrown, every strategy perfected, we altered the balance of life on Earth. At first, this impact seemed small, almost invisible, but in hindsight, it was profound. Wherever humans went, extinctions followed. Does this sound familiar? Today, in our modern world, species vanish at alarming rates, driven not by spears, but by industry, deforestation, and climate change. In a way, we are repeating an ancient pattern, only now on a far greater scale. The fall of the giant sloths becomes not just a mystery of the past, but a warning for the present. And yet, within this warning lies hope. Our ancestors may have helped end the reign of the sloths, but they also carried their memory forward. They told stories, preserved bones, and perhaps painted images that still survive. Memory became myth, and myth became heritage. By remembering the giants, humans gave them a form of immortality.
So what do we do with their story now? Perhaps we treat it as a guide. The sloths remind us that no creature, no matter how massive, how seemingly eternal, is immune to change. They remind us that survival requires adaptability, cooperation, and respect for the balance of nature. They remind us that humanity, though fragile in body, is immense in will, and that this power can both preserve and destroy. Think of the patience of the sloth, its slow endurance. Perhaps there is wisdom there too. In a world that races forward with technology and ambition, the sloth's lesson is to slow down, to move deliberately, to live within the rhythm of the earth. For those who gaze into the mysteries of archaeology, the extinction of the giant sloths is not just an academic puzzle. It is a story with emotional weight. It asks us, what kind of ancestors do we wish to be? Just as we study those who came before us, one day future generations will study us. What will they see? A species that consumed until there was nothing left, or a species that learned from its past and chose a wiser path? There is something almost poetic about the fact that today's sloths, the small tree dwellers of Central and South America, are among the slowest and gentlest of animals. They're like living echoes of their giant cousins, whispers of an age when humans lived beside creatures that seemed like living mountains. When you see a modern sloth clinging to a branch, it is humbling to imagine its ancestors towering over early humans. In those quiet eyes, perhaps, lies a fragment of the forgotten past. The reflective power of the sloth story is this. It bridges the gap between then and now, between the hunters who lit fires in caves and us who light screens in the dark of night. We are bound by the same questions: how to survive, how to thrive, how to live in balance with the world. So when we remember the giant sloths, we do not just remember their bones. We remember the lesson they carry: that survival is not guaranteed, that power carries responsibility, that memory is as important as discovery. And perhaps most of all, we remember that humanity's story is inseparable from the creatures we shared the earth with. To forget them is to forget a part of ourselves. The giant sloths may be gone, but in their shadows we can glimpse both the greatness and the fragility of the human journey. And if we listen closely, they still whisper across time. Learn from us. Do not repeat the same mistakes. Carry our memory into the future.
From the moment our ancestors first set eyes on the giant ground sloths, their lives were forever intertwined. For humans, these towering creatures were both a challenge and a gift, sources of food, tools, and perhaps even spiritual meaning. For the sloths, humans were a new force in the world, a predator unlike any they had faced before. And in the end, it was humanity, alongside the changing climate, that helped write the final chapter of their story. As we trace their massive footprints across the grasslands of South America, as we stand in awe before the fossils preserved in caves, one truth emerges. The world our ancestors walked was unimaginably different from our own. It was a world of giants, where survival meant navigating encounters with creatures that today seem more like myths than reality. Yet these giants were real. They lived, breathed, and left their mark on the human story. The extinction of the giant sloths forces us to ask questions that reach beyond bones and stone tools. What is the true cost of survival? How do we balance our ingenuity with our responsibility to protect life around us? And most haunting of all, are we still repeating the same mistakes? Driving species to extinction through our relentless expansion? When we remember the giant sloths, we are not just telling the story of a vanished animal.
We are telling the story of ourselves, of the hunters who stood together in the face of impossible odds, of the storytellers who wove myths to explain the mysteries of nature, and of the survivors who carried memory forward so that we might learn. Perhaps that is the greatest gift the giant sloths have left us. Not their bones, not their hides, not even the legends whispered in distant forests, but the reminder that humanity has always lived at a crossroads between creation and destruction, between awe and exploitation, between memory and forgetfulness. So, the next time you see a modern tree sloth hanging lazily in a rainforest canopy, remember that it is more than just a charming oddity. It is a survivor. It is a living echo of a lineage that once produced giants. And in its patient eyes, we may find the same question that echoes across time. Will you learn from the past, or will you let history repeat itself? We may never know the full truth of why the giant sloths vanished, but what we do know is this: our ancestors walked with them, feared them, hunted them, and perhaps revered them. And in that ancient relationship lies a reflection of the choices we face today. So I leave you with a question. If our ancestors could speak, would they tell us to be proud of our triumphs or to be cautious of our power? The mystery remains, and perhaps it always will. But the search for answers, through archaeology, through myth, through reflection, is what binds us to them. And it is in that search that we rediscover not only who they were, but who we are. If you found this journey into the forgotten world of giant sloths as fascinating as I did, I invite you to join me on the next one. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think humans were truly responsible for their extinction, or were they simply witnesses to the end of an age? The story of the giant sloths is over, but our story, the story of discovery, survival, and memory, continues. And together, we will keep walking into the mysteries of prehistory, where every fossil, every cave, and every whispered legend remind us that humanity's past is far stranger and far more extraordinary than we dare to imagine.